Anybody who starts snoring, make sure you don't wake your neighbor after that fine meal. My name is Jason Kuehl. Spent 18 years as a tree grower in Omaha for a big retail garden center there. And along the way, learned a whole lot about a lot of different trees. I'm not classically trained in horticulture. My degree is actually in soil and crop production, corn and soybeans. So I learned trees by doing it, which I guess means I didn't know enough to not try some things. So we're dealing with some pretty extreme climate as we move north from Omaha. And this is the North Central Hardiness Zones map. 25 years ago when I started, I think Omaha was listed as Zone 4. Now we are listed as Zone 5B.
Yeah.
There, a little too far?
A little too far. Probably perfect.
That better?
Yep. There you go.
Okay, sorry about that. Sioux Falls is listed as a 4B. And we get a lot of diverse weather. We have a lot of diverse soils. And things are changing all the time. The hardiness zone map has changed over the last several years. So we keep looking at different plants that we could be using. I like to look at other climates, other regions across the globe that have similar hardiness issues that we have. Korea makes sense to me. Northern Afghanistan has similar climate to us. A lot of things that we've been recommending and using the last 25 years: ash, Colorado blue spruce, autumn blaze maple, all make sense. But when we use so much of that canopy, we bring in some problems. So there's some things. Maples, you can't throw out the whole genus. There's a lot of great maples. Varying degrees of fall colors, varying degrees of soil tolerance and drought tolerance. The key is to pick the right ones and to use the supply chain. So we need to be constantly having dialogue and conversations about what we can use. So easy enough. There's some autumn blaze. Great red fall color. They live through the warranty period. It's usually really key for us, right? Seed and lemon and wine are also really good choices for that. And they will take a higher pH than a regular rubrum. Good rubrums, though, would be red sunset or brandywine. I'm sure you guys are probably familiar with those. Good red fall color, but not as quick growing as a blaze. They're all relatively easy to propagate, and Herman was talking about the whole propagation system earlier. These guys are pretty fast. So they're typically pretty easy to find. There has been a shortage of trees the last few years. They're coming back online to where you can even get bigger sizes. State Street maple, Acer miyabii. That's one that is native to northern Japan. And State Street is actually a Chicagoland grows introduction to the Morton Arboretum. We've been playing around with this one for years. I'm sure you're using it up here a little bit. Really adaptable soil-wise. Pretty good yellow fall color, really corky bark. It's a tough tree. Usually it is grafted on Acer campestri, which is pretty tolerable all the way around too. Sugar maple. Okay, so we all know sugar maple. Most people probably don't want to use sugar maple because typically homeowners kill them. It does not like to be wet. Wet feet are a problem for sugar maple. If we plant them where it's dry, they're typically just fine. They're definitely zone hardy. Green Mountain and Fall Fiesta are probably the best known. They're probably the best choices, I think, right now. One that people don't know as well is black maple. That's the western extension of sugar maple. And it can be pretty hard to find out there, but green column black is a version of it. Ironically, it doesn't look that much like a black maple. Black maple and Green Mountain sugar maple look very similar to me. Green column black has a big droopy leaf. I have one in my yard. They are on the slower side of the growth span, but they're good trees. They're just hard to get liners, and they don't grow real fast in the nursery setting. So they can be a little hard to get. Right now, they're extremely short. 6 years ago, we were bulldozing. It's all that planning and having demand and supply come together at the same time. Amelanker, another tree that's really popular. Trust me, they don't all have to say autumn brilliance to be a good serviceberry. Standing ovation is, I believe, is that a Bailey tree? I'm not sure, but that's one in my backyard, believe it or not. It's a columnar, it's an alnifolia, which is a native. But other serviceberry amelanker species that work well would be labus or cumulus. Varying degrees in the fall color. Autumn brilliance is probably a little superior to some of these, but they're all really good. The various forms. Standing ovation would be smaller, narrower. The rest of them are fairly round-headed. They can be multi-trunked or a tree form. They're actually better as a multi-trunk tree. They're quite difficult to grow straight as a single trunk plant. Very high demand right now, and supply is very low. So if you need serviceberry, expect to be looking at substitutions. They're just not available. As with the law of supply and demand, prices are up because the demand is high and the supply is low. So again, we need to look for other options. Hackberry. That happens to be Prairie Sentinel. That is a columnar selection that came out of Kansas. And we're pretty impressed by it. We've been doing it for about 7 years now. So it's same as a hackberry as far as tough. They'll pretty much live anywhere. They're a little ugly when they're small. It gets better as they get older. Once they hit 2 inch and get bigger, then they're a pretty picturesque tree as they get large. There are some improved varieties. There's some things that are on tree lists out there, like Prairie Pride. That's a funny story for me. I've been still looking for Prairie Pride hackberry for 25 years, and I haven't found it, but it's on every tree list I've ever seen. Chicagoland's another one, and there's a few crosses with not occidentalis, but it's the southern hackberry. Anyway, you're starting to see some of those come into the trade as well. Those aren't proven on how far north they're going to run yet, but there are some good characteristics to the tree, so we're still watching those. Honey locust. There's another tree that 8 years ago we were cutting them down and burning them, and now you can't find them at all. Even at 2 inch, they're very difficult to get right now. Skyline, Shademaster, Northern Acclaim, and Imperial are probably the 4 best known right now. I would say that Skyline and Northern Acclaim are the most hardy. Probably the 2 most similar. Shademaster is a wonderful tree, and it's called out for, spec'd out a lot. And it does hold its leaves a little bit better than the other ones, so it does get a little bit better of a yellow fall color. But I think Skyline and Northern Acclaim are definitely a little hardier. They're all fairly similar. Imperial is a little bit shorter. Shademaster is more like an Imperial as far as the width. Skyline would be the straightest growing of them. So that was my favorite as a grower because I didn't have to worry about staking it quite as hard to get us a good central leader in it. So they're all native to here, and again, they're all in really short supply today. I think that'll change over the next couple of years, but if you're looking for 3 inch honey locust, you're going to be looking for a while. Crab apples. There's so many crab apples. There's maybe 250 or better different varieties of crab apples. But there's more varieties to choose from than just spring snow and prairie fire. There's actually a lot of different crab apples. The garden center I work for, the interesting part, the luxury of working for a garden center and being able to grow your own trees was I could grow 5 of everything if I wanted to. So it was a great experience. And you got to grow things that had yellow fruit. You got to grow things that were narrow in the price book. If we had a columnar white, we had to have a columnar pink or red, horizontals, globe-headed. There's a ton of them. So that gives us a ton of variety to choose from to diversify into different things and fit different situations in the landscape. The key is the disease resistance, the scab, the fire blight, persistent fruit. So newer varieties are much better. Everybody remembers their grandmother's crab apples that all the fruit fell and was a big giant mess. A lot of them are so much better than that today. So on the left, that's a row of raindrops. In the middle, that's a prairie fire. That's a coral burst on the top right. And this is a sugar time, and that fruit doesn't drop. Maybe in the middle of winter when nobody cares. Red jewel, very similar to sugar time as far as the fruit set. smaller, still a bright cherry red. And the bottom right one is a very upright version called Gladiator, which I think that is a Bailey's introduction. And that's we're pretty impressed by that one. We've had that in production for about 3 years now. I think the size range on that one is supposed to be somewhere about 18 by 10. So there's a boulevard tree, I would think. There'll be a theme today on colony trees. Because we're living in a place where we have houses are right on top of each other, we need smaller trees for narrower yards or smaller spaces. Everybody knows aspen. Aspen's a great tree, but what about Swedish Hollander aspen? Populus tremula is slightly different, but it doesn't get the anthracnose and the black spot issues that a regular aspen can get when it gets humid, so it's a bigger issue for me in Omaha. Availability is becoming better on this plant over the last few years. 5 years ago it was almost, I wouldn't say nothing's impossible, but it was pretty hard to find Swedish Hollander. It's getting easier as growers are figuring out it's pretty easy to grow, and the demand is growing for it. The specimen, and that data is from a couple of years ago, but the one at the Schmidt Arboretum in Oregon was about 40 by 8. I planted some late 90s in Omaha, and they're probably in the 35 by 6 or 7 foot range now. It stays pretty tight. Lilacs. Matthew talked a little bit about lilacs earlier. Most people think of Japanese tree lilac, reticulatus, regular reticulata. Ivory silk is the best known one of the bunch. It's more upright. There's a few other varieties out there too. That's usually the easiest one to find. Actually grows better north than it does south. The farther south you get, it just languishes in the heat and it drops its leaves very early. So it's really a northern tree. You can plant it pretty much anywhere. Poor soil will slow its growth down a little bit. It is slow as it goes anyway. It needs to be in a 2 to 3 inch range before it looks like much. But again, it's a good tree. It can be used either as a single trunk or a multi-stem form, so there's a lot of different things you can do with it. The one that nobody knows is Peking lilac. China snow is an extremely popular variety, if you can call any Pickensis popular, because nobody knows it. They're fairly big and round, white-headed. That's not a great picture, but it's the only one I have. They're very coppery bark. They peel. That would be a very round tree as it got bigger. So as a multi-stem, it's pretty wide. Makes it very extreme. Good white flower, but really it's the bark, I think, that you plant it for, and the adaptability. American lindens. Now, what we're seeing is that American linden in Omaha is being thrown out with the green spires. We can't plant green spires at all. Japanese beetle adore green spire linden. And so if it says linden, nobody wants it. But what we're seeing in the growing fields is that American Century and some of the other Americans like Boulevard and Front Yard, the Japanese beetle basically leave alone. And we've got Japanese beetles so bad in some areas where they're spraying with airplanes. So for them to not hit these, that's a pretty big deal. So I like to reinforce the fact that we need to use Tilia americana. If you think you're going to have Japanese beetles, I would probably stay away from little leaf lindens. They decimate them pretty bad. And after about 2 or 3 years of that stresses them out enough that we do see some other insect pressure. But large tree, slow, does not look like much when it's young. An 1.5 inch tree is kind of a stick. But once they get going, at 3 inch, they're wonderful trees. And that is another one because of the broad range at which it's native to and where we can use it. The demand is pretty high, and because it goes all the way from Colorado to the East Coast, it's planted pretty much everywhere. So really hard to get a hold of again right now. Okay, here's some things that I really think we do need to be looking at. Some you've heard of, some of these you might not even have heard of before. Hot-wings Titterian maple, Titterica, is a subspecies of Janala. So very similar to hammer maple, a little more round leaf. Not quite as good of a red fall color as a flame hammer, but it's still pretty darn good. The really nice thing about it is the red Samara seeds in the summer are really giving another whole season of interest. And kind of a shrubby tree, if they're pruned correctly, which is another good sales pitch, and they'll sell some maintenance there, you can turn them into a pretty nice specimen tree, but a lot of times they're fairly multi-trunked or stemmed and kind of shrubby, but they're really tough. I think that was founded in the Fort Collins area. This one's kind of a personal favorite for me. I've been playing around with this one since '96. I've run through a couple of them in different landscapes myself. Like I said earlier, I like to look to Korea or other places. There's similar climates to ours. Shantung maple is a great tree. It's listed zone 4, sometimes zone 3. 25 to 30 foot tall in the books. I'm thinking it's going to be a little bit bigger than that. Fairly round. This is I would love to see the fall color be this good every year. It's not. There's a lot of room for selection, and we have some people looking at that. It's very variable. Mine happens to be the straightest one I've ever seen in my yard, and it gets no fall color whatsoever. It goes from green to done, and it's over. But we are looking at selections that are turning red. There's a few introduced out of Texas that aren't considered zone hardy, but as I've tried them all the way into Omaha, they're fine even though they're listed as zone 6. So we're experimenting with that. Great drought tolerance. And it's not well known here. It's getting really well known in the South. So Oklahoma, Texas, they're scooping them up as fast as we can produce them, but I know they're going to be good here too. The first one I planted was in '96. I thought I made a mistake. It died back. I grew it up into a really big clump over the next 12 years, and then I sold it when I moved off the farm and moved to town and planted another 1 3/4 inch, which is now that tree. So that was planted as an 1 3/4 inch tree in '07, summer of '07. Part of what goes along with talking about Shantung maple is the fact that there's a whole group of crosses with Acer platanoides. So you've got a Norway Shantung cross. I think that's pretty much all Schmidt's introductions. Pacific Sunset is probably the best one of them, or Norwegian Sunset. Crimson Sunset is the far right picture. And that makes a really good replacement for Royal Red or Crimson King. It's a glossier leaf. My opinion is it doesn't tatter as much. Should still be similarly hardy. I have not seen the need to wrap the trunk like the old Royal Reds. You could probably argue it's still a good idea. So that's Crimson Sunset. That's Ruby Sunset, or a picture of Ruby Sunset out of the Schmidt catalog. And there's another new one called Urban Sunset. Those actually show the best promise for fall color that we've seen now. That's still new to our trial blocks at Scholl Brothers in Kansas City. But what we're seeing so far, we're pretty impressed with. The standby right now is Pacific Sunset. That's the one that it typically will get some orange. It's a decent sized medium shade tree. You kind of get all the best attributes of the platanoides and truncatum going. I don't know where this will affect the platanoides backlash from the East Coast and moving across into Wisconsin and Minnesota, where they're talking about it being somewhat invasive. I have a whole other take on the whole invasive thing. I think we're in the Great Plains, and if it would be invasive and take over, we'd probably be grateful. We just don't see a lot of trees that want to be here. I think you'll see that burning bush and amber maple and Acer platanoides in the eastern forest. Sure, they're going to come up out of the woods. We don't have any woods, so I guess we'll see what happens there. But hopefully they don't get, as they say, the baby thrown out with the bathwater. Aesculus buckeye, Aesculus glabra or Aesculus hippocastanum. There are a variety of hybrids as well. That happens to be Autumn Splendor, one of my growers out in Oregon. That's the flower. There are pink and reddish versions as well, and there's actually some creamy yellow ones too. Autumn Splendor and Homestead are both area introductions. I think Homestead is South Dakota, and Autumn Splendor, I believe, is out of the Minnesota Landscape Arboretum. Those have been my preferred choices for the last decade of growing trees for our area. Peyote, and there's a few other crosses where you get the reds or the pinks. Those are fine. These are better when it comes to just how they take our area. They can be fairly slow when young, and they do not look like much till they get going. They need to be in that 2.5 inch range before we really take notice of them. I'll probably say this a few times, they're kind of worth the wait. The flower's worth the wait. They do get pretty big. There's an example of one here in Sioux Falls. That's a pretty good sized tree. Somebody might have pruned that differently when it was young, that would have been okay, but that's a big tree. One more thing about Autumn Splendor, and Homestead in particular, they do better in the humidity and the heat. If you use regular Ohio Buckeye, they scorch. They get too hot in the summertime for us, we're too windy, and they drop their leaves and they never get any appreciable fall color. Homestead and Autumn Splendor will get there. American Hornbeam, Carpinus caroliniana. That is, I think, a native tree all the way up along into Sioux City for sure, maybe even a little farther north. It's an understory tree, so it would appreciate some shade. It's not impossible to find in the market. It's pretty hard to find big. So if people are wanting 2 inch or bigger, that's pretty tough. They can be a tricky transplant in the first place. Probably better container grown, but it's out there. It's out there being beat. That is actually a picture of a Palisades hornbeam. There's a couple varieties. Some of the guys over in Wisconsin, like Mike Yanni, have been working, and you're starting to see some named varieties out there that I know could be really impressive, a more reliable fall color, especially if you get into some orange or red. I don't remember all the names of them last time I talked to Mike, but I know he's working with that. I think there's some good selections to be had there. You would probably appreciate not just the shade, but a little more of an acidic soil than what we have. But it is adaptable if given a little time. But I've never seen it go chlorotic even in bad soil. So books might tell you it comes from an acid soil area next to a stream bed, but it doesn't mean it won't work other places. Redbud. Redbud is a really interesting discussion to have. So the native range of redbud is pretty much all across the country from the Rockies to the east. So it's listed as Zone 5 or Zone 4. Typically it's listed as Zone 5, but we know there are redbud seed collections that would come from northern hardy zones that do find. They grow a little bit differently, actually. There's a Minnesota strain that Bailey's has that, in my experience, does grow a little bit differently, but it lives. There's a strain out of Wisconsin that is what we grow that's really hardy and seems to grow. It's more similar to a regular Eastern red, but there's varying different colors. They're all either going to be a rose pink or rose reddish purplish flower, except for the white bud, which is white. But there are some new ones, new varieties. Rising Sun is one that hasn't been tested very far north at all, to my knowledge. It's fine, Hearts of Gold's another one that's yellow new growth. The rest of the tree's green, the fade is green. They're pretty striking. I think there's a lot of room to see how these things do north. North Dakota State has an introduction that we're trying to get a hold of. That could be very interesting. I mean, if it'll live in Fargo, I think it's got a pretty good shot here. But it's a little hard to get a hold of right now. Seed strain is the key. You can take a seed red maple or taxodium, bald cypress, or a redbud. If it came from the south, it probably won't live here. If it came from a northern part of that tree's range, even if it is grown farther south, it'll be just fine here. It doesn't matter where it's grown. It's the same as with a clonal plant. A red sunset doesn't care if it's grown in Tennessee or Ohio. It's going to be hardy where a red sunset was selected from. So it doesn't really matter where the tree is grown. That's why I don't like maps that have cutoffs of you shouldn't buy a tree from south of the Nebraska-Kansas line. It won't live. Well, that's not necessarily true. Yellowwood, one of my personal favorites, so much so that I coerced somebody into planting one on the walking trail behind my house. I guess I should have probably pruned that branch off now that I look at that picture closer. Zone 4, maybe Zone 3. There's some specimens of the Minnesota Arboretum that have done well for years. It's going to be at least 30 feet tall. It's going to take a while to get there. Yellow fall color. Some years pretty good, actually. Very pH tolerant. I don't see any insect or disease pressure on this tree at all. Correct me if I'm wrong, anybody who knows it, I just don't see that. And the availability of the last few years, I've seen this called out on jobs for a long time, but the availability of the last few years has actually gotten pretty good. It's fairly readily available in 2-inch and smaller sizes. The problem, again, with demand and supply hitting at the same time is that 2 or 3 years ago or 4 years ago, we probably cut down and burned a whole bunch of these, and right now we've just got a few left, and then demand starting to creep back up. So that's always a key. It's always the trick in this diversity talk that we're having, is making supply and demand hit at the same time. Dogwoods. Pagoda is probably the one that you would think of the most here, I would assume. That is Cornish alternifolia, and that's the picture on the left. And it's great. It does great in the cold climate. It's got a very horizontal branch structure. It's a great specimen accent plant. But there's a couple other ones we're trying that I'm sure would be fine hardiness-wise, and they'll definitely tolerate the soil. Cornish moss, cornelian cherry dogwood, has a yellow flower pretty early in the spring. It's one of the first things to flower. And nobody seems to even have heard of it, generally speaking. We really need to use more of that one. Kusa dogwood, Cornish Kusa, I was introduced to it in the mid-90s when we had a project and I had never heard of the plant before, and I had to go searching for it. And we did a walking trail on the Iowa side of the Missouri River, and it was calling for Kusa dogwood. And that was the first time I ever planted it. And over the years, it's become more and more popular, and there's selections out there, Milky Way and Milky Way Select, that look to be like they're probably zone 4 hardy, white flower, kind of like a Cornish Florida, but it actually lives. They can be multi-trunked or tree-formed depending on how they are grown and pruned. They are all fairly slow growing on the front end. Of course, there's a lot of other Cornish species, a lot of shrubs. Ginkgo. The last 2 years, I've turned down more requests for ginkgo than I care to recount to you. If there was a field of 1,000 ginkgo, I'm sure I could have sold them 4 times. They're very tolerant. It's the oldest known tree of mankind, and they are slow. I don't like to use the word slow. I agree with some of the talks earlier where it is more of a perspective thing. It's a relative thing. Yeah, it's slow. It's real slow, but it's worth the wait. They'll take pretty much any condition. I don't think I've ever seen a disease on anything other than maybe a little bit of black spot, and I don't think I've ever seen an insect on one. So it's a worthy tree, even if we got to start them small. Supply chain wise, it's horrible. There's never enough. They're slow. They can be difficult to propagate. The take is not real good. 30% being thrown away was a statistic we heard earlier. That's probably very similar in this one. I know in some of our grafting attempts here lately, or technically budding attempts on it here lately, I think we ended up with a whole lot of straight ginkgo biloba instead of the cultivars, so we're still working on it. There is a lot of different ones. Princeton Century is very often called out for. Autumn Gold is old reliable. There's a lot. There's dwarf ones, there's little guys on a stick. There's collector plants, Troll, American is one. Some of the bigger ones are Magyar, Sarasota, Saratoga. Don't quote me on either one of those. And there's some newer varieties too, but any of them are good. And pretty much if anybody's asking for a ginkgo, they'll probably take any one of those varieties. And they are an expensive tree, and that's not going to change. They'll never be mass produced. They just take too long to get there. If I say that this is my favorite tree, I may have said it 2 or 3 times already today, so I apologize. This one is my favorite tree. Probably because my great-grandfather planted 3 of them in the front yard of our farm place in 1939, and so growing up, they were this big, and didn't know how cool that was until I got older and realized, hey, that was a coffee tree. And I didn't care that it had seed pods because they were particularly fun to throw at my sister. They do get big. They are native. They have a panicle leaf, pinnately compound, I think is right. That is the 2-inch espresso outside of the fence by the Yellowwood. Seems to be a trend there too. There's not enough room in my own yard for all this stuff, so I got to keep planting other places. Can be a really great yellow fall color, extremely tolerant. They are another tree that's in high demand because of the broad range, and they do not look like much when they're young. 2-inch, 2.5-inch, they really start coming in their own. 4-inch, now you start to see a pretty nice tree. At 1 inch, you might have 2 branches. You might have a straight stick at 1 inch. 2 inch, you might have 2 branches. But that is my favorite tree. I would plant it everywhere. And I don't care if it's a male or not, although there are several male cultivars. Espresso is probably the most widely known. Stately Manor you see on paper a lot. I've never seen one personally. Decaf is one we're playing with. True North, I think any of them are probably interchangeable on some level. But Espresso is the one that you see the most of. For years it was very hard to get because from what I heard it was hard to propagate. I think they've figured that out because the last few years it's getting into rotation pretty well. I think there's room for both to be planted. I don't think it has to be male because it's dioecious. You have male or female trees, so you can plant straight Kentucky coffee tree and you may end up with 50-50. But planting male is generally what's asked for because then you don't have the fruit. And they could be a little bit messy. The seed pods are about that long. A little bit like a honey locust, but flatter and shorter. Herman stole my spotlight on this, and I was going to tell everybody that the tree-form hydrangea is trained up. It is not a top graft. But hydrangea paniculata is a pretty tough little courtyard plant. It doesn't really probably fit into most of the diversity talk that we're talking about with shade trees today, but it makes a really lovely ornamental and fits tight spots. And it doesn't overwhelm the spot very often, because typically you prune them back to get another flower set. So you keep them kind of in this range. Limelight is a really quality one. Quick Fire is another one. And you can plant them both because they flower different times. Pink diamonds and white diamonds are a little bit older ones, but still good ones. If you're looking for a dwarf tree-form hydrangea, it's going to be a while because they don't tend to grow fast enough to get trained up to here to put that head on. That's why you don't see bobos or things like that in the tree form. Magnolias. Typically Star, Royal Star, and Merrill are considered the hardiest ones. Anything also that would be crossed with Cobus is going to be really hardy. All of those would be a white flower. That would be probably a Royal Star, which is just a shorter version of a star. You don't really see stars in the trade anymore. Merrill is probably not quite as good of a flower as Royal Star. Anne is a pinkish, purplish bloom. Very similar to Jane. That's the Little Girl series. Susan, there's a few other ones, Lily, I think. They're supposed to be a little bit smaller as far as literature goes, but the ones I've seen grow pretty fast and get up there. So I don't think they're going to be saucer-esque or anything, but they're going to be nice-sized magnolias. Those I would use in protected areas, not so much because the tree isn't hardy, but because the cold, our spring frosts, our movement and weather patterns tends to freeze the buds off. So a protected area where you don't get a whole lot of variability in temperature swings, probably best. Butterflies is really, really hot the last few years, and it's ironic because it seems to be planted in spaces where you should plant a limelight hydrangea, except that that's an acuminata, and Magnolia acuminata gets 40-50 foot tall. So site placement's a big one on that one. I think that's going to be hardy here. I really do. I've seen Elizabeth magnolia, which is not as good of a yellow as butterflies. If you ever have the chance to go to Arnold Arboretum, which would be Harvard's Arboretum, I saw an Elizabeth magnolia there a couple of years ago that was probably that big around, planted in 1979. That's a really cool arboretum, unless you take your kids. And then they start laughing at you after 3 hours and make you leave. So, typically the magnolias are going to be found in containers. You don't see a lot of them in the B&B world, usually because they just sell before they get to that point. There you go, Jason. Amaranth. That is a tree that we should be using so much more of, and it's just never on anybody's list anywhere. I don't say that because we're growing it. I don't say that because I like it myself. I say it because it's true. They're tough. It's native to, I think, Manchuria, northern China, northern Korea. Mid-sized tree, another one that is going to take a while to get going. It's got a decent peel to the bark, kind of a goldish green color. It's definitely zoned for hardy. It's just not well known. It's flowering at a time when nothing else is. June, July, I don't think there's anything else really flowering that time, not in the tree world anyway. And I think, and it's got some interesting leaves, I think it's going to become more available as people want it, because growers know the plant, they know it's a good tree to use, just we need to have people that actually want to use it. Now, report tree, Philodendron amaranth. There's another tree from that same region. This one's going to be a little bit bigger. That is one down at the farm taken last week. You can see the bark out when I pulled off the internet. I cheated a little bit there. That is the quirkiness of the bark. It is definitely hardy enough to live here. It is soil tolerant. It is a decent grower, a little hard to train when it's young. It's free of any pest that I know of. I haven't seen anything on it myself. This would be an excellent alternative to an ash tree for sure. This is a tree that's getting a lot of run the last few years. It's coming up on more and more lists, and it should be. Platanus. Now, most of the time when we think of platanus, we think of Platanus occidentalis, which would be sycamore, and there's nothing wrong with sycamore. This is just an improvement. This is another Chicagoland grows introduction, so out of the Northern Arboretum programs in Chicago, and it's a cross with, it's basically London plane tree with an improved zone hardiness. We know it's zone 4. London plane tree is not, so you want to be careful about plane trees. You need to use exclamation. That's the plant of choice. And it's the best of all of those. There's a few other introductions in their line. I think Ovation is the other one. This is the better tree. They're going to get big. They're going to grow fast. They're going to be best suited for a park type setting or a large commercial setting where there's a lot of space. Pretty aggressive grower. Dinner plate leaves. For a lot of years, up until maybe the last 2 or 3, it was a little bit harder to get. Now they're growing so fast and there's so much demand, they're readily available. And that's one of the few trees right now that is available in bigger sizes. There's a lot of oaks to talk about, and there's a lot to say about oaks. There'll never be enough oaks on the market. Even if we just talk about a handful of them. The common known ones are the northern red and the swamp white bicolor. Bur oak, macrocarpa native all across the plains. That's the kind of the 3, okay, we're going to go to those all the time. And we should. We've got to watch the soil a little bit with a red and a little bit with a swamp white oak. They will go a little chaotic. I do think there's room for improvement through selection on soil tolerance. I see a lot of variability in swamp white oak from seed, where sometimes there'll be some chlorosis in the leaves and sometimes there won't. So that's the kind of thing we're watching for with diversity, trying to find new and improved things. I know that's one I've been keeping my eye on for a few years. Shingle oak, that is definitely native to Nebraska along the river, but that's one that grows in alkaline soils. It grows in chalky soils, limestone soils. I don't know that it's listed zone 4, but I think it is zone 4. And oaks have been moving north for years. I just had a professor out of Georgia. I was a lecturer in the Iowa Shade Tree Short Course last week, 2 weeks ago, sorry. And we had a very interesting discussion afterward about how oaks have been migrating north as long as the glaciers have been migrating north. So even though shingle oak might not be native to here, it may very well come this direction, and it should handle the same soils it's handling south here. So we need to be trying shingle. And that's a lance leaf. I wish I had a picture of the leaves up there, I apologize. And they'll actually get some red fall color. It's a brick red, it's not real staggering, but anytime you can say red fall color. Chinkapin is one I would like to try. NDSU is doing some work with dwarf chinkapin, and they're having good luck with that one. So that's just a dwarf version of Muehlenbergii. I think chinkapin, another one, just like I described with shingle oak, real soil tolerant. It grows in places that a lot of oaks would never dream of growing, with a decent amount of speed to it. And that's a yellow fall color, a round ovate leaf, some teeth to it. Really a big taproot. That one can be a little bit of a challenge to dig. In fact, we grow it in a grow bag and take it to the field in the fall, so it transplants well. If you start it from bare root, I've had to dig 2-inch trees with a 50-inch tree spade to break the tree roots loose, and then you can come back in and dig it in the 26. It's kind of weird. The one I think that has the most room, I know it's on the list up here, which is great news, is heritage oak. And the heritage oak, people don't really know enough about that one. It gets all the good stuff from a burr and an English oak. It gets the soil tolerance of a burr, it gets the speed and powder, it gets the speed from the English oak. So it's really a fast growing oak. Everybody assumes that oaks are slow, not heritage. Heritage grows really fast. It doesn't get powdery mildew in the humid climate because of the burr oak in it. So it's got really the best of both trees. I'm glad to see that it's on somebody's list because it really, it's also got a smaller acorn, so it's really a tough tree, and it doesn't have any chlorosis problems. I really think it should be taking over on commercial settings and compact soils and that, where you'll often see swamp white oak spec. I think heritage would be the better choice. Oops, wrong way. Back to the columnar trees again. So the one on the left is that's Kindred Spirit. That is a columnar English and swamp white oak cross. The Regal Prince would be the other one. That's going to be a little bit wider. Kindred Spirit's very narrow. Regal Prince is more of an upright teardrop, still fairly narrow, but I think they're both valuable because they can be used in different spots. Because Kindred's quite a bit narrower. And Regal, you could space it out along a boulevard and it would look like a boulevard tree. Kindred Spirit would look weird because it's too narrow. Crimson Spire would be the ones on the right. Now, eventually, Crimson Spire would be a little more, I hate to use this word, a little more rectangular looking in my experience with it. What you can't beat it for is its fall color, because it's crossed with white oak Quercus alba. So it makes it tough to transplant. It is horrible to start from a bare root tree in the nursery. It is much better to buy that tree as a container to start it, or a grow bag. Not a problem when it comes to balling it up, though. Our losses there are not a problem at all. It's really in high demand. It's not an easy one to propagate, I would assume, because of the alba in it. So, again, supply and demand really kind of stinks on that one these days. So go out and find them early, because your landscape distribution centers should have them, hopefully, but as far as the growers, they're all going to be sold out. And there are others too, by the way. There's 4 or 5 other ones. We just haven't evaluated those enough to know if we like them as growers. Then there's actually a columnar pin oak as well. That one, I'm afraid, is going to have the same pH problems as a regular Polaris. But there's other ones that came out of the same line of crosses as Regal Prince and Kindred Spirit, and I think those are also bear watching. These are the 2 we've identified as being our favorites at the moment. And at the moment, for the last 10 years. Pears. Now, if you're a little farther south of here, pears have been all of the rage of discussion this season in how invasive they've become. Callery pear looks like eastern red cedars up here, and at home for me, when you get into Kansas, Missouri. In fact, Ohio State has now put Callery pear on, I think they're in year 2 of a 5-year phase out where there won't be any to be planted in the state of Ohio. So pears is kind of a dirty word. Interestingly enough, there's been genetic studies on pears, and you can see that when pears start to become invasive, it's because of all of the different varieties started crossbreeding together. They would pollinate each other, and you'd end up with all these random occurrences. Well, Autumn Blaze doesn't have that problem. Now, Autumn Blaze is a zone 4 pear, so I'm assuming you're not using a lot of Callery pears up here, but you could use this one. And if it's the only one that's up here, invasive isn't going to be a problem. That's good news. I wish I had that problem at all. So it's the hardiest. It's white flower in spring, red fall color. Fall color is 2 weeks earlier than all the other Callery pears, which means it actually gets to fall color in an early fall. Pretty much will live in any soil. They're round-headed guys, so they need a little bit of space, and they look a much better. They look like a much nicer tree once they hit that 2.5-inch range. because they're fairly coarse when they're young. So if you see a potted one, you go, I don't like it that well. But when you see it as 2.5 inch tree, well, they're lovely. Elms. We heard some about elms already today. And I agree with on the propagation discussion and how available they are. They are very difficult from a dirt plant at times and to get to that point. The hybrids that we are liking the most right now are Triumph and New Horizon and then Patriot. We've tried, I think, a lot of them. I don't know how many. Triumph really is really the most refined and nicest grower, if you can call any elm a American hybrids are definitely popular. There's really about 4 that are out there. Princeton, Prairie Expedition, Valley Forge, and I think it's New Harmony. In my growing years, Princeton is by far the nicest of those. Prairie Expedition might be a little hardier. That's another NDSU introduction. It's a good grower. I think Princeton's a nicer looking tree at the same size, but we have to keep Prairie Expedition on the radar because it is so hardy. Not that Princeton isn't, but Prairie Expedition will probably run farther apart. So they'll go anywhere, they'll live anywhere, and again, we still need to keep planting elms. They are more available now than they have been over the last 4 or 5 years, because as quickly as they grow, and you do have to be a good grower to grow a nice one. There's a lot of work, just like there's work in the propagation aspects and the growing of a small tree. They're really a lot of work. If you prune them, they just get mad and grow 4 more feet. So you've got to stay on the pruning schedule. Handful of evergreens. That is the most popular juniper on the market today, everywhere south of here. That is Taylor juniper. That is Juniperus virginiana. That was found in Taylor, Nebraska, I think in the 70s. That's in my yard. Those were 6 foot in 2007. They are 23 foot now, and I've never touched them, not once. That's how they look. Picture's a little misleading. Those are probably 4 feet wide. The ones under the deck are completely open because they hate shade. They also don't like being in a container, so they're a little hard to find in a pot. The secret there is you can't keep them dry enough without killing them. They do not like it wet. But they'll take any soil. And they're widely used all the way to Texas, and now you're starting to see them go east to Minnesota's using them. So pretty popular. But there's other junipers as well that we should be using, and I don't mean just the Rocky Mountain junipers and scopularums, which is a real problem for me at home because we get too humid. We end up with phomopsis and other issues with scopularums. I'm sure you guys can do better with the skyrockets and the moon glows and the Wichita blues, and with what I can do, I cut those out of production years ago, which is too bad because there's some really good blue forms in there. That's a really bad picture of a really cool juniper that I didn't even know of until a few years ago. That's a Berkey, and that is probably 12 to 13 feet tall, and they are very purplish blue when the slide isn't blown up that far in December. And I think a great substitution for a Colorado spruce. That's a Hetz columnaris. So this would be a Virginian elm on the left. That would be a Chinensis. So that's fine. That's also, I think, a December picture from a couple years ago. Now that one's been sheared. It's not going to be quite that columnar. There's going to be a little more spikiness to it, but they are pretty upright. Now another not quite so well-known thing is like the Taylor juniper is often put on Hetz. Hetz transplants really well. Virginiana doesn't transplant as well. That's one of the issues with Virginiana junipers. Spruce didn't come up much today, and I kind of wondered if it would. If you're in Minnesota or Iowa much, they pretty much won't let you plant any Colorado blue spruce anymore. And it's not just Rhizosphere needlecast, there's actually 5 needlecast issues. And so Colorado spruce is really falling apart, and everybody's searching for the next thing. As pine bolt nematode came in on Scotch pine a few years ago in my neck of the woods, and eastern white pine doesn't get planted as often as it should because if you plant it too late in the fall, winter burns. Same with Norway spruce, which is a darn shame. All of a sudden, Austrian pine gets too many needle diseases and some other insect pressures and ruin pine while Scotch pine is falling apart. Let's just plant all Colorado blue spruce all the time. Now we're starting to see Rhizosphere in Omaha. It's a needle cast. It does not kill the tree in 1 year. It will affect last year's growth, so it takes about 3 years for it to kill it, 3 to 5. It's treatable, but how many things can you actually be able to treat? We have other things we got to worry about. So a couple things that we're seeing that don't have as many problems with that yet is fat Albert spruce. Now, it's a grafted spruce, which means it's on a Norway rootstock, which has nothing to do with the needle cast issue, other than that's how most grafted blue spruce are grown. They're grafted on Norway. It's easy to graft to. So that's a fat Albert, probably in the 9-foot range. Great tree with a bad name. It's not fat. It's just a nice looking Colorado blue spruce that's very consistent grower. And what we're seeing is it's got some resistance or tolerance to some of these needle casts that are going on. So of all of the spruce trees that are being used, that one's gotten pretty popular the last couple of years. So let's hope that continues to stay true. That on the right is a Picea glauca pendula, or weeping white spruce. Another tree that I don't love the name on because I don't consider that being weeping. Weeping tends to be this kind of stuff. It's pendulous. That one's about 16 feet tall. That picture was taken last week. And it doesn't seem to have any problem with needle cast. Of course, it's usually planted in places where there's a lot of airflow. It doesn't get very wide. That thing is not 3 feet wide at the base. It's probably 2.5 feet wide at the base. And if you're trying to plant a screen using that plant, it's probably not a good choice. It would be much better just an accent plant, but it stays in a very tight area and will get very tall and stay very narrow. And it does grow straight. That tree's never been staked. It just goes up. Other spruce that we have to keep planting, Black Hills. That's a no-brainer, especially for South Dakota. Black spruce is one that nobody knows about, or at least very few people know about. Black spruce is Picea mariana, and it is native to kind of Minnesota and east, and will grow in areas that actually have some water in it. They'll grow in boggy areas. So if you've got compacted soil that's going to stay wet, maybe we should be trying that. We know it's cold hard enough. Just nobody knows what it is. It is kind of hard to get hold of, but we grow it. Norway spruce, I'll kind of come back to where I was visiting a little bit ago. Norway spruce, if you go to a lot of cemeteries in this part of the world, those are Norway spruce that are 100 feet tall or 80 feet tall. Yeah, granted, there's no limbs for 30 feet, but there's no doubt that the tree lives. But for some reason, in the last decade, we quit planting it. We need to go back to planting it. It is the fastest growing spruce. So as far as windbreaks go, yeah, in the long run, it's going to lose that bottom effectiveness, but there's other things we can plant on the front side of that windbreak. But some of the cool things is Picea abies has all these different cultivars. In fact, it's ridiculous how many cultivars there are. Two of the coolest ones, Weeping Norway, which that would be called a specimen. They will tend to be a little bit more like this. This one was grown specifically like that. It's pretty cool. And Cupersina. Cupersina is columnar Norway spruce, and it's one of the really popular trees right now in the whole upper Midwest and Rocky Mountain states because it does pretty well. It's almost impossible to find over 6 foot right now because it is so popular. 7 years ago, you could find them up to 12 feet. Now you're lucky if you can find a 5 foot. But all that stuff changes over time. So hopefully we can get production ramped back up on that one because that is a good tree. I don't know if you guys are using that at all in this area, but it's one that, it's not a hardiness issue at all. Wind burn, maybe. A little protection may be a good thing. Pine spongiana, lace bark pine. Zone 4 or 5. It's kind of a light green color. Really a slow grower. That guy's going to grow about 6 inches a year. So it's a specimen evergreen. This isn't a windbreak type tree. Not that you couldn't use it for that, but you would be waiting for a while. But the key to this one is the bark. And again, the picture doesn't do it justice, but that is a 18-year-old tree that's about that big around. And you can kind of see, but there's some greenish gold tint to that trunk. And so I have elevated mine up so that you can see the whole bottom of it. And it's really pretty, especially when it's wet. Again, it's a specimen type evergreen. A few other evergreens of note that I think are always valuable to talk about, even though most people don't use them. Swiss stone pine, Pinus sembra. That would be a large one in the left photo. It's Stay pretty upright, really slow grower, 4 to 6 inches a year. And then Vanderbilt pine on the right, a couple other pines there that are worth looking at. And lastly, we've got about 3 slides left. Hardy rubber tree, Euconia omoides. Zone 5, probably zone 4. We know it's survived -20. It's just another plant that we probably should at least try someplace. Southern sunflower. That is a color that nobody sees in the fall, but that's the calyx, the fruit. So liners are hard to find, exfoliating bark, shrubby tree. And the last couple, that's Carl Fuchs Theodore cedar. That's one from Afghanistan. It's at least a zone 5. 11 years in West Omaha. That was last week. Another cedar that would be worth trying. Cedar Lebanon. We know that's already in zone 5, probably zone 4. So those are a little bit more fun ones that you just don't hear about. Bald cypress would be one that we would have to watch for chlorosis and high pH. It would have to be selected from a seed strain that would be of a northern range. Very popular tree last year. Last one. Some other things that we see on jobs all the time. Black alder. It's always spec. It's really hard to find. The reason it's so hard to find is not because it's hard to propagate, it's because it's hard to contain it. It wants to grow so fast, it grows through the pot, it grows out of the B&B, it grows so fast in the field, you can't harvest it before anybody wants it. So alder's a great tree though, but that's why you have a hard time finding it. Korean maple, again, it's just slower, but it's a great northern replacement for a Japanese maple. So ornamental maple, small space area, that's it on the bottom. Australia Virginiana or ironwood, kind of similar range to Carpinus, they kind of go right next to each other. They don't transplant very well, so you're going to find them small. So don't be specking 2-inch ones because you're going to probably have to buy them in containers. But you're seeing it called out fairly regularly the last few years on jobs. You just have to know it's difficult to find. But it is out there. I kind of hit on all this stuff earlier, so I can breeze through this. It takes a long time to get trees to a size. This is talking about plane tree here, but yeah, a 2-inch tree in a nursery is anywhere between 3 and 7 years old from the liner stage, usually 3 to 5 years. So that's why trees, we have to talk about trees early on. The more conversations we can have with architects and city foresters and growers and distribution centers, the more conversations we have, the easier this gets. So before we talk about what plants we're using in the future, we need to have those discussions with the supply chain and figure out how fast they're available, how readily available they are, what sizes we can get them in. Thanks for your time. I appreciate everything today. And if there's any questions, we'll be up here in a little bit.